It's called Crisp, and it's supposed to clean up the audio and make the background and get rid of the background noise and all that. And I had that turned on in ScreenFlow, but turned off on my computer. So that got me.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of SEO Fight Club. I'm just saying hello in the chat and reminding people to ask questions. Be sure to ask early because sometimes we don't get to everyone's questions before running out of time. Doesn't always happen, but it sometimes happens. And if your question is urgent, then please ask it early so there's enough time for us to get to it. Um, I would like to start today by talking about the statements that John Mueller made about Google not being able to crawl faster. And I would just like to point out to SEOs that is an admission by Google saying they're no longer uh, as capable in that area as they used to be. So they're kind of tipping their hand on their feebleness, and you get what you get is what John Mueller is saying, and there's no go faster button in Search Console, so don't look for it. But the truth is, John Mueller is not an SEO and he can't solve SEO problems for you. And when you talk to an SEO, they're going to know, oh, hell yeah, there's a way that Google can crawl your website faster. And it starts by looking for those infinite crawls that came flooding back when Google got rid of the URL parameter tool. So if Googlebot is interacting with your faceted navigation, your sorts and filters, your add and remove to cart functionality, or anything else that Googlebot shouldn't be getting into, if you fix those problems, Googlebot will crawl your website more completely and more efficiently. So right now, Googlebot's getting into a category and it's adding and removing products from the shopping cart and it's running out of crawl budget and saying, we'll come back next week and continue. And meanwhile, you only got 5% of your website crawled. So the fix is don't let Googlebot crawl those things. And it's not a robots.txt thing. It's if it's Googlebot, don't even draw it on the page. Don't give them a choice. The only category sort Google can crawl is your default sort. There are no sort options for Googlebot to select from. It can crawl the category one time and one time only, not 30 times, just blood pressure. Blood pressure. It's
Dude,
going to
you
be
are
one of
speaking
those
to me
shows,
today.
people. Um,
Ted, you are speaking to me today because I have run into this issue and I spend a lot of my time, especially with enterprise, but I'm finding this with e-commerce clients where folks say, well, how do we get this out of Google? And I'm like, don't give it to Google to begin with. You're 100% right. Robots.txt does not solve any problem. Google says that in their own documentation. Don't use robots.txt to keep things out of the index. And folks will come back and say, well, we'll use the robots meta tag. All that does is keep Google from serving the page. That's all that does. John Mueller has said that himself, and I think he is right about that. Google documentation says it themselves. If you understand how Google crawls sites, the last level is serve. They will still crawl a no index, and they will still waste the crawl budget on it. Dude, you know what? Thank you, because I have a rant today to go on, and you're helping me get into the right state of mind.
Oh, it's game face on. I can see the game face, Charles.
How do you
Oh, go
how do
ahead.
you as Charles pointed out, and you, Ted, you said don't use robots.txt because Google ignores robots.txt. And John Mueller says Google ignores it, so don't use it for this feature, the eliminating the crawl on parameters. But Google's documentation says use the Google parameter in your robots.txt to keep them from going. In the add to cart.
Yeah,
Add to
that
cart
does
function
nothing.
is specifically pointed out in the Google documentation. If you don't want Google to crawl and add stuff to your cart, block in your robots.txt, add a notation in there so Googlebot doesn't go to the add to cart parameters. So what the hell are we supposed to do? And then the follow up is if you don't control server. So I was listening to you talk, and your implication was if Google use your server and your HT access to keep them from going to your parameter URLs, and you can't do that, i.e. Shopify, Squarespace, and then all those other things.
Yeah,
And
you gotta
if you can't use robots.txt, then what the hell are they supposed to do?
if you have access to the code, you can change those features. So you have a couple options on the web development side. You can change those features uh, to either not be A tags, links with anchor text, because that's how Google's typically finding those features is they were developed using A tags. You switch those A tags into button tags with on-click calls, and Googlebot won't interact with them. So that's one thing. So if you can change the web development so that Googlebot doesn't interact with it, Googlebot won't get into it to begin with. And if you can't, then you need to complain to your hosting provider that Googlebot is doing this and that they need to switch those A tags to buttons so that Googlebot isn't interacting with the faceted navigation and the shopping cart. And so that's important, so those are kind of your mechanisms. You have one other mechanism, which is my favorite. If the user agent says Googlebot in any way, shape, or form, I don't care if it's fake or real, don't draw the faceted navigation, don't draw the cart stuff. Googlebot does not even need to see it. And if it does weird things on layout to Googlebot, who cares? It'll be right for humans. Just don't even draw it for Googlebot. And that's the safest thing because then there's no way Googlebot can do the wrong thing. And it really sucks that robots.txt does not solve this. The URL parameter tool used to solve it because what the URL parameter tool used to do is if it saw the parameters, it would strip them from the URL before proceeding. And there is nothing that fills that function anymore. The robots.txt does not do that action in the processing. And Google, in their confession that, we cannot crawl any faster. Yes, they can. They could make their end not suck so hard and not engage with obvious faceted navigation and obvious add to cart functions. Their AI is so powerful that they can't figure out that a URL that says add to cart with a product ID is something they should ignore. They can't figure out if a URL says sort by size that they should probably ignore that on a crawl. It so, if they're the geniuses that everybody thinks they are, then they ought to be able to solve the simplest of problems. And I'm just not seeing that happen.
You know, I took this
So,
all a different way. I'm gonna agree with you and be contrarian with you, Ted.
okay.
I think on that specific instance of crawling a site and Google kind of screwing itself with its own rules, yeah, I'll agree with you 100%. But is the problem that at scale, or is the problem like we've had since day one of the internet, that content manufacturing is at scale and it's at an exponential scale that maybe now they just can't keep up with? Because we've been
Oh,
talking about that for years.
I totally believe that. But, who are the pompous people saying that, we're all great and you guys are horrible and they're delivering pain, and so it's at some point, they need to be responsible for their side. And so the slowness of their crawl, they can fix it too. The slowness of their crawl, we can fix it too. And both sides should probably do it, because both sides would probably benefit tremendously. Imagine how much in resources Google is wasting doing infinite crawls with shopping carts.
Mhm. I see that, but I don't know that if you look at the problem of all the crap that they have to crawl, what percentage of it is, the shopping cart type issues on a website that's created by their own foolishness, and what part of it is just the sheer flood of, content that, and we've got more tools now to produce shit faster than ever before. It's not just links, it's, websites. You could throw up
It's
thousands of pages a minute.
it's a one-line solution to skip URLs that say add to cart in the parameters. Like, it is one line of code. So it is the minimum. You can't get a smaller amount of lines of code to fix a big problem that is burning money and hurting people. It's a one-liner, Google, one line. If the URL says add to cart in the parameters, skip it.
Well, now because I know where Charles is going to go, I'm going to come full circle on this and come back to Clint's question. So, if I'm on something like Shopify or Squarespace or one of those other platforms where I don't have access to the code to make those changes that would help me out, I'm pretty much screwed.
Well, you can rally with your other Shopify customers and create the letter to send into Shopify. Hey, you need to switch an A tag to a button to solve a problem that's causing me headaches.
So
If
you
this
think
is happening on Shopify, it is an equally simple thing for them to fix, and it's probably one line of code again.
so you think Clint is going to
So,
organize the million SEO Shopify march on Google?
Yeah.
well, at some point, somebody out there can fix that line of code and go, oh, a tag is now a button. Okay, done. Poof. So I'm not buying this thing that there's nothing that you can do, and there, yeah, you
Well,
can.
it's not. Oh, I'm not. Oh, there's nothing I can do. But what your suggestion, one, I would have anyone would have to get. It's a big ass company traded publicly. Your concerns about your web development are the last thing that they care about. So you would have to get more than a couple people to complain about it. So let's talk on change.org level just to get their attention uh, to do it. So it's minded for a bit small business owner who's trying to run an e-com store. That is nothing. They're not going to do that. They're not going to piss away in the wind to try to get rid of that.
Yeah,
So
but
then the question is,
But
Now we get
when
into
they see
testing.
someone else do it, they can like and
Jump
share
on.
and say yeah along
Yes.
with them. So
So 5-10 years from now, okay, then Shopify actually starts caring.
well,
And
you
I
can
would
do
submit that
nothing too, but you can also have a voice.
if enough people are complaining about this, and to Clint's point, like Shopify's like, yeah, we don't care. We got
And
market share. We don't care.
and
There
for
will be
the
a competitor will
record,
pop up.
I haven't seen a ton of Shopify sites with this problem. So I think we're targeting Shopify when they might not be the primary culprit of having the issue anyway. Most of the websites that have this issue are older custom stores online, older platforms that haven't updated. It's a lot of the legacy stuff that's hitting this the most. So I think we're fixating on Shopify too specifically here.
Only because we use it as an example of other CMSs that people might be using.
Yeah.
And most people know Shopify. So.
And those problems are real, not having access to the logs, not having access to the source code, not having access to the developers of it who could do something to it. So yeah, those points are real, but Shopify might not be the culprit specifically. But anyway, that was my rant on there's no way Google can crawl faster. I think there totally is, from an engineering standpoint. All right. Handing it over to Charles because he wants to talk about pitching enterprise now that our blood pressure is all amped up and we're ready to be pissed off. Take it away, Charles.
So actually, I'm going to make a small change because I had my own rant yesterday that started, and I decided, you know what, this has to be a rant that's going on to Fight Club. So I will do pitching enterprise next week. Today, Charles is going to rant too, and you picked a good day to pick the subject because it is very related to what I'm going to rant about. One thing I want to say just before I start, Lee, you mentioned how I think I think a lot of this is Google's fault on both ends. So to Ted's point, yeah, Google could make some changes to their code. They could bring back the parameter tool. But also, what's Google been saying for the past 10 plus years? Build great content, build great content. So what have webmasters done? They've flooded the internet with content. Every tool is about how to make more content because that's what Google's been saying, build great content. So everyone's like, fine, we'll just flood the internet with content. And now Google's created their own problem. So that's oh, you know what, Ted, you gotta
Oh, yeah.
let me show.
Hang on a second.
Yep.
There
Ted
we
was so
go.
angry he forgot his job.
Hey
It's playing
guys,
God with access again.
I'm a professional.
So on the heels of Ted, let's listen to Charles rant about something. This specifically is going to be Wix today, but it's not. To your point, Ted, it's, when we were talking about Shopify, I can give you lots of reasons why Shopify stinks. I can give you lots of reasons why Wix stinks. Today, I'm going to talk about Wix, but I don't want to fixate on the platform so much. There's a learning that we can get from this, and I think that's really what I want to try to do here. Is like there's something we can get out of this. So if we remember, this was a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. I did a quick presentation. There was a story in a search engine journal about how long migrations take, and they found that the typical migration took 523 days, which is not a migration. If it takes you a year and a half to migrate, it's not a migration. It's the analogy I used was, imagine you went to a contractor and said, I'd like you to put an addition on my house. And they said, no problem. We're going to destroy your entire house down to the foundation and then rebuild a new house and put an addition on it. That's essentially what a year and a half migration is. It's you've destroyed your old site and you've had to rebuild a new one. But why? Why does this stuff happen? It happens because most CMS systems are very restrictive. See, Ted, I knew this is like perfect. And I was hoping not to raise your blood pressure today. I was hoping to give you the jollies of watching me get my blood pressure up, but we'll both get upset at the same time. So we're going to use Wix as an example. I don't want to get fixated on just Wix, but I am going to use Wix as my rant today because they pissed me off. So I hope you're listening, Wix.
They're awesome, man. I don't understand what.
And I'll hear lots of people come back and say, well, you should be using this platform or that platform. It's not, every platform has their weird restrictions. If you're going from if you're going from an HTML site to WordPress, well, you've got a new URL structure that's happening. The only thing I will say that's good about something like a WordPress is because there are so many different plugins, you can usually solve a lot of these problems. But because there's so many different plugins and themes, there's all kinds of security holes in WordPress. So, there is no free lunch. So one of the things I learned at the literal 11th hour of doing a migration with a client is that you must use a www when you do Wix. You cannot have a Wix site without www. This is not something they talk about very much. This is not something you'd know until you stumble into it. Then, to make it even better, you can't create a custom non-www redirect to a www. They won't let you do that. If someone comes to the non-www version, they will 301 redirect it over to you, but you can't create your own custom redirects. They not only force you to do a www, they assume that the site's always had a www, and there's no way to redirect anything that's not. You can't even have the same URL slug, even if it's in different folders. So the problem here is the system's trying to think for you. The system is trying to say, well, we know better than what Ted is doing, or what Clint is doing, or what Lee's doing. We're going to just figure all this stuff out for you, which is fine, but you got to have overrides. You've got to have ways to be more flexible. You've got to have a system that allows someone to say, okay, well, yep, that's good for maybe 90% of your clients, but there's a 10% that need more. So then if you're going to have these restrictions, you better have good documentation and support. They can't be lacking. So again, going to keep picking on Wix here. These are actual answers I got from Wix tech support, and these were specifically SEO people. And I always love getting in conversations with SEO people from some places because they always give me these weird answers that don't make any sense. So one of the things they told me is www is added automatically to a domain's URL since it is a traditional method of structuring your web URLs. This ensures compatibility, especially with older browsers and systems. So you can see my little note there. WTF? What is that even supposed to mean? I know that's not true. What I do know about because I got a different tech to admit it to me, is that the way they've structured their servers, you wouldn't have a secure server if you weren't at a www. It's just the way they handle their server certificates and their CNAMEs. And I'm sure it's probably a lot more complicated than that, but this is what gives SEOs a bad name. These gibberish non-answers that don't make any sense. And then they told us that the www part does not harm the website ranking because it automatically redirects anyways. Oh my God, no. Just because so this goes back to what Google will say. Google will come on and say, I'll just redirect and you're fine. No, don't just redirect. You won't just be fine. There is a system you have to go through. And when folks take things that Google say at face value and then build a system around it, you're just asking for problems. And then my favorite quote back from them was, they checked our website in Google. So we had just done the migration. We had just moved over from, I think it was WordPress. They moved over to Wix, and I'm working with the SEO team that in charge of this company site. And the tech comes back to the team and says, I've checked your website on Google by searching it without the www, and it's opening correctly in the search results. So what he did is he typed in the company name, and then when he clicked on the link, it opened fine with the www. So he's like, there's no problem. Even though on Google itself, it showed the domain without the www. You can see Google was crawling a different page. And I think really what this goes down to is, and this is happening all over the place, folks don't understand how Google understands URLs and the importance of that. The slashes, the wwws, the HTTP, the HTTPS, these are all different to the search engines. Having a slash versus not having a slash. Having a .html, how is that different? Is that the same? People look at these pages often and say, well, they're kind of the same, or they're auto redirecting, or I got a canonical or something like that. Oh, so it's going to be okay. no, it isn't going to be okay, because Google does see all these things as different. John Mueller, one of the few tweets that John Mueller has done that I actually appreciated and thought was a very good tweet, was one where he explained how all these different URLs were different and treated differently. So if you're going to have a system, every system forces a certain kind of URL structure. I understand that, but you have to have the flexibility to give people, how do you fix it? How do you go from one system to the other system without crushing people's websites? And that's why most of these migrations end up being 500-day migrations, is because you have URL structure changes and you have systems that either can't handle it and or people involved that don't understand that when you change your URL structure, you're changing how Google crawls the website and you're changing how Google stores your web page in the index. You basically reset your SEO. So I already said, what have we learned here? There's a reason the average migration takes a year and a half. It takes a year and a half because CMSs are restrictive. They have specific rules. That's okay, but they have to have flexibility. Typically, WordPress gives you a little more flexibility because they've got plugins, but that comes at a cost. Your system has to be able to handle the changes. So I don't care if you're Wix or Shopify or WordPress or GoDaddy website builder. I don't care what kind of site it is. If you're going to force something on users, you have to give them the ability to handle that. And you have to give them the ability to do some kind of customization. You've got to have clear documentation. And if anything else, you need support that understands how this stuff works. I know it's easy and cheaper to get, I'm just going to get somebody overseas and they're just there to answer questions and keep people moving on. I understand that's what companies are doing, but you can't do it. And then my real ultimate message to SEOs out there is you're going to have to become the expert. You're going to have to understand this. You're going to have to understand what Ted was talking about, that Google will crawl any link you give it. You can't have your add to cart can't be an A tag. You got to have a button. If you're going to have some kind of faceted search, use it that's going to send an infinite crawl, use an on-click event. Don't use the A tag. Exclude Google from seeing things. Don't even give something to Google. They don't need to see it. If you don't want to rank it, don't even let Google see it. Don't even give Google the option to see it. Because when you get into their documentation and read the developers' documentation, not like before bedtime or something, but anytime you hit a subject, go and see what Google has to say about it in their developers and developers.google.com. See what they have to say about it, because you're going to find things like robots.txt. Google will straight up and say, yeah, no, we don't crawl that. Or if you have links to a page, even though it's in your robots.txt, we're going to crawl it, and we possibly will even index it, and they'll show you in Search Console. So that's my rant.
So Charles, how much additional work did you have to do because of these restrictions on Wix in this migration from WordPress?
Well, so this is a great example of how migrations, they always have little things popping up. We did end up having to do a lot of extra stuff. We spent a couple hours, again, at the last minute trying to change stuff. It forced me to do some testing to figure out how can we get around this. What are some tricks we can do to get around this kind of stuff? The cool thing is the one good thing is when I hit these roadblocks, it forces me to get creative and do a little test. And I've learned some very interesting things what Google can and can't do. So I've added them to my toolbox, but I don't want to have to use those kinds of things because these tricks can come and go. I love SEO tricks. I love ways of getting the search engine to do something that they probably don't want to do or wouldn't want to do or wouldn't like if they knew I was doing it. But I don't want to have to rely on that stuff because those things come and go. I know, Lee, you and I have talked about something that I discovered just in the last week, and you're like, that didn't used to work. So, it can be in my toolbox, but someday it may not work for me. So I shouldn't have to use tricks. But yeah, and we went from what was going to be a really good migration, an ideal migration, to I had to tell my client, don't worry, folks, we'll be okay, but it's not going to be ideal. Like I go in with a lot more trepidation for this migration than I was originally going in. I was going from it's going to be an awesome migration to I think we'll be okay because we have all these other. So I'm a belt and suspenders kind of guy, as I've always said. I have layers of protection on top of what I do. So if this doesn't work, I have this, and if that doesn't work, I have this, and I do it just because I always come up with these really weird things at the 11th hour. And these CMSs always throw something weird at you at the last minute and say, oh, we can't do that. And it's as though why would you even want to do that? Why would you even want to not have a www on your domain? We would, come on, come on, Wix. You know, there's plenty of websites that don't use www. So
all of these platforms, Wix, Shopify, all of them, even WordPress to a degree, the convenience that you get for having something that is so simplified also comes with, handcuffs. So you get to, sort of choose the problem that you want to have. And I know here, part of the problem was the documentation and the absolute stupidity of the SEO team that you were dealing with at Wix.
the Wix team, yeah. The team I was doing for the client was very good, but
yeah. So we had, because we had a website that we were doing, and the theme that we were using decided to make an upgrade to the theme, and the upgrade added multiple H1s. And so Honey went back to the theme maker and said, hey, how do you turn this off? And their response from their team was, well, John Mueller said having multiple H1s is not a problem. And she said, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, how do you turn the thing off? That's the thing. So it's, here you're having to figure out, workarounds on that stuff, because somebody has taken what Google said literally and built a system around it, a theme, or, a content management system.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of SEOs don't realize that the way the web is architected from the beginning, from day one and still today, that every single page of content has an infinite number of working URLs that are different that will return a 200 OK. So like Charles pointed out in the earlier slide, there's the secure and the non-secure form. There's the dub and no dub form. There's the trailing slash and no trailing slash. You could also add on imaginary parameters of A equals 1, A equals 2, A equals 3. And even though there's nothing using those parameters, you're making unique URLs that can be indexed and discoverable and crawled and posted out there. And there's an infinite number of working URLs for every page of content on your site. And that's why the canonical tag exists. That's there to say the official URL for this content is specifically this version of it. And so, yeah, with this Wix project, if Wix doesn't support it, you're kind of screwed, and you have to go back to the client and say, part of this migration is you're going from no dub to dub. And the cost of doing that is, going to be, we have to redo the canonical, and it might take months for Google to do the right thing with your rankings. That's a price of a migration like that, and all migrations have a price. I've never seen the free migration.
So Ted, you're going to get a little picture on my slide once I update this. This needs a row I to account for parameters, because I hadn't really thought of parameters when I was putting this together. But you're absolutely right.
Don't forget anchors. Don't forget login credentials. Don't forget port numbers. There's a lot in the URL specification. Yeah. There's literally an infinite number of working URLs.
The problem with the canonical I've found, and I've done this too. Look, I used to use the canonical as, oh, we have a million versions of this page. No problem. We'll just throw canonicals and that solves all the problem. Not really, because if Google can still crawl the old stuff, it will still crawl and waste its budget. And here's something I've learned, and I'm not even sure I want to say this. Just don't trust canonicals. Canonicals don't work nearly as well as you think. And I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't want to.
Well, you're
Something
right,
bad.
and some of that is Google's fault, and some of
Yeah.
that is website's fault.
Yeah.
So if you're canonicalizing page 7 of a category to page 1 of the category, you have taught Google that your canonicals are not trustworthy.
Yeah.
And so Google is less likely to honor them if they're all kind of bogus. So if you're using them incorrectly, then yeah, you're gonna have a lot more problems. So you want your canonical URLs to be strict and to be trustworthy and to be correct. If the content is unique, then the canonical should be unique for that content. And page 7 of your socks category has different content than page 1 of your socks category. And when you start showing Google that the content never matches on any of the canonicals you give, you're saying we don't know how to use canonicals. And so yeah, you're right. And Google will still discover them, but if you use them correctly, what usually happens is eventually in time Google will go, okay, we should give all the credit to this canonical because we're starting to see that every time we see other forms of the URL, they're all saying, no, 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 this one, there's some agreement here. And so that's what you want to have happen because then eventually you'll get all the page rank credit to move over to the dub where you didn't have it before. And it sucks and it's slow and it doesn't always work, but it's kind of the only game in town. So you got to figure out how to work with it. Um, and then other than that, yeah, you need somebody at Wix to solve your problem for you, which would be awfully nice. And, it probably isn't even that big of a project, but because it doesn't have braggable uh, return on investment, it'll never get prioritized.
No, I'm going to tell you, they had Charles twisted up yesterday. He was so animated, it was funny. You sit there and say, Charles, I'm thirsty, and he goes, you know who's thirsty? The SEO team at Wix is thirsty for some knowledge. Let me tell you what they did.
Yeah.
he was on it.
So Ted, I'm gonna say that I think Wix, Shopify, all these sites, all these companies, they have a huge revenue opportunity. If they can build a system that's flexible, that allows folks to migrate in without crushing, they now have a market advantage, saying you can come to us. It's not going to crush your website, not going to crush your SEO. Hey, why use WordPress, which is full of security holes? Use us. Oh, and by the way, here is a basic guideline of how you migrate to a Wix or Shopify or whatever without crushing your SEO. And okay, without an expert involved in the step-by-step, you probably will still take a little bit of a hit, but you could mitigate that. You wouldn't have a year and a half hit. That's for sure. That's for sure. But that agreement you talked about, Ted, that is huge with Google. Google does look for agreement. I've seen that with URLs and canonicals, that if you don't have good agreements, Google will get confused. If you don't have agreement with dates on your on page for your dates, Google will get confused if you don't use dates properly.
Yeah, if you're not consistent with your brand, if you're Sears.com little s, Sears.com big S, little s Sears, no.com, big S Sears, no.com, Sears, comma, Inc., uh, Sears Incorporated, Sears Roebuck. If you're not consistent with your brand, even, you're going to have a hard time. So there's a pattern.
I'm gonna go on a mini rant about pagination too, because since you brought it up. So pagination is one of those things that that I ran into earlier in my career when Panda first came out. I had an e-commerce site that got literally crushed. And it happened the moment that the second Panda came out, and we weren't sure what to do. And one of the things I thought about, like, maybe I should canonical. And so what we did is exactly what Google says don't do. We canonicaled all of our paginated pages to our main page. Once the next Panda came out, within literally a week, it was a hockey stick straight up. Then Google came out maybe a year later, said, I think they realized that you could do that. And they said, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You should be using, rel previous. Rel previous, everybody do that. And so folks started doing that. I didn't change it for any of my e-commerce sites, and they stayed fine. And then several years ago, probably 5 years ago now, I'm thinking about it, Google came out and said, oh, by the way, rel previous, yeah, we haven't supported that for well over a year and a half. Snicker, snicker. Like, oh, oops, guys, we forgot to tell everybody. Isn't that funny how we forgot to tell you that? It's like, come on, Google. So now they'll come out and say, oh, yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. A webmaster doesn't want to hear that, because if I have a page one that has certain promotions and whatnot on it, and my page 2 through 7 or 2 through 29 does not, I don't want those ranking. I want my page 1 ranking. So if Google's going to fight me on it and try to say, nope, we're not going to honor, we're not going to do rel previous, we're not going to trust your canonicals if you canonical wrong, just let us figure out what to rank. Well, that's not good either, because how am I supposed to use the site, or how am I supposed to use Google to present the page that I want to present? And that goes back to the whole rewriting of titles, rewriting of meta descriptions, and argument that Google's made it worse by trying. And it's much like this Wix example. By trying to make it so that we don't have to think about it, they've actually made it worse.
And you do have to think about it. Like, if you think about the infinite crawl scenario with like the faceted navigation, the sorts and filters, if you sort a category by price descending, you are actually changing the content of the page, but have you correctly changed the canonical URL? Is it going to canonicalize to the sorted URL, or is it going to canonicalize to that page number without the sort? And so you have to go in and check, because if you change the content of the page, then you probably have to update the canonical URL to reflect that content change.
I'm working with a Shopify client right this second. That is exactly their problem. They have, if you looked at all the pages, you go into the pages report in Google Search Console, and 90% of the pages in that report are just variations or different sorts of all their collections pages. Now, Google sees the canonical and seems to be respecting the canonical, which is good, which is what they should do. But as a webmaster, so this goes right back to what you started with, Ted. Because it's using parameters and these things can't be blocked, Google's finding the URL, it's crawling it, and now Google has too much to crawl. We could cut Google's crawl of this website down to 10% if either Shopify would give us the right tools or Google would give us the right tools. And then we could solve the problem. We could solve Google's problem for them very easily.
Yep, and that's why custom is the new custom, because nothing beats custom in an environment like this. Because you can solve the problem yourself with custom. It's just going to cost you web developers and development time. So I guess pick your poison at the end of the day. What do you think, Clint? You've been awfully quiet.
No, I'm just been I've had this problem before, and I'm just learning from you guys. So hearing your perspectives.
Yeah, there's no good answer at the moment. So if you're unsatisfied with our answer, we get it. We're not satisfied with our answers either. That's why we're mad and our blood pressure's going up. All right, let's get to some questions here. Let's see. Um, let's Let's see, people offering advice on parameters and URLs. Let's see, what other platforms than WordPress can you recommend that are great for content websites SEO wise? Static HTML. It's actually what Google uses for a lot of their documentation websites. Is they use static HTML. It is so secure. It's the least hacked out of all of the platforms. It's yeah, static is awesome. It's the fastest, it's cacheable, it's low tech, it's easy to hire people for. It's easy to back up, it's super easy to deploy. Um, yeah, static has a lot of advantages. The problem is you have to learn a little bit about, ad- administration of servers and file transfer, and there's a little bit of knowledge you have to learn to be able to do it, but uh, static is fantastic. And I know that's an answer that most people aren't satisfied with, but as you grow and you become a bigger target for hackers and stuff, you might find that migrating to static HTML is a breath of fresh air. It might just be the solution you've been looking for. What do you think, Charles?
Think I don't know how to find my mute button. No, static HTML is the nice thing with static HTML. I start all my sites with that. Now, what I'll often do, so I have a couple sites, a couple affiliate sites I've launched. I start with static, knowing that I might eventually have to go to WordPress. But what you can do, because it's static, is I can imitate the URL structure of WordPress. And so if I ever, it's not even a migration. If I migrate, I'm just now have something new in the back end. The nice thing with static as well is if you're coming off of a WordPress, a Wix, a Shopify, you can mimic the URL structure of the old site. So it's not a big deal to go from one to the other. So I love static. Now, here's the problem with static. I'm not a designer. I'm also not a coder. I play one on TV, or I play one on the web. I don't even play one on TV. I play one on the web. So you will run into all kinds of problems and like, okay, how do I solve this problem? How do I fix this? Whereas a WordPress or some of these other systems, it is easy. I'll agree. It's so much easier. My own personal website, I made WordPress. It was a static page. I turned it into WordPress because it was just going to be easier. Once I get to a certain level in a year or so, I am going to end up turning it back to static. I'll just have to bite the bullet and pay someone to do some design and dev work for me. But yeah, no, static's the way to go.
Yeah. And the consideration, what you're weighing there is think of the last 5 times, somebody had a hacked website. What were they running? There you go.
I mean, that's not really fair either, considering 68% of the websites on the internet are WordPress.
It is.
I mean, your
It
odds
is
are
and
pretty.
has.
If you're running WordPress, your odds are pretty likely you're going to deal with hacking, sure, but 68% of the web is there, so that's where 100%
Yeah,
of the
but
hackers
it
are.
has been the number one hacked platform for its entire lifetime. So yeah, even now, but
Because
even
it's
way back in the beginning
popular.
too.
If Drupal was as popular as WordPress is today, then Drupal would be the number one hack thing.
Uh, I don't think it ever competed as much. There just weren't that,
I said if. I didn't say
yeah.
that that's the case, but I said if Joomla was the number one CMS right now and 68% of the internet was on
If you
Joomla,
took hacking
Joomla.
as a percentage of installs and got rid of the scale, I still think WordPress has them beat by a lot. So yeah, I hear ya. There is some of that in there, but it's still at some point you got to acknowledge it is the most hacked platform of all time.
Let's see.
Because it
It's an
is the
easy one to
most
go
used
for.
platform.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why it's the easiest, because, you've got all these plugins and all you have to do is find one, that's got if you can find a leak in it or something like that, or a way of a vulnerability, then you've got hundreds of thousands of potential, gain. Whereas to
Yeah.
hack your HTML site, what do I have to do? Hack your server?
And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, all the 0-day vulnerabilities, they're almost always about, somebody wrote a plugin, sold it to someone, the someone they sold it to was nefarious and has all these installs everywhere. And it, that's what you're getting, you know?
Mm.
And to say it's just because it's the most widely used, no, they have this plugin architecture that has this problem, you know, and eh, they could fix that, or you could not use plugins, but then you're going to make it hard on yourself, and then
Yeah.
it's a choice.
Well, if you're not, just argue at the premise. You know what I mean? I'm
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I would say that HTML is correct. It was the best way to go, but you are sacrificing ease of use for a normal person. Where Lee or Honey can design this really kick-ass theme, and I can use that and push it up, and boom, it sets up. It's real nice. You are
Yep.
sacrificing that. There
Yeah,
is
yeah. And
alternatives. I mean, you can buy themes. Code Canyon is full of awesome ones. Now you have to learn, how do I edit the themes and put the pages up, and which template of do I use the
Yeah.
page template, a post template, and all that madness too. So you're giving away a lot for security.
But
And
here's where the problem creeps in. This is where it gets in and gets people, is they figure, well, I've used WordPress and I know a little bit about securing it, and I put in the security plugins and I followed documentation on how to do a secure install, and I went very carefully, and I've never been hacked, and I've done it this way for years. That means it's tested and secure. And the problem is that's security by obscurity. And if you're not a big target, you're not going to see a lot of attacks. But as you scale, you become a bigger and bigger target, and that standard of security, it's a false comfort. It's a false defense. And so it's as you become a better target, you're going to be more inclined to regret that confidence in the security. And so just know that as you scale, you have a migration, you have a transition coming that's going to be about security.
well, I think as you scale, to be more to the point, you should not be relying on last year's security and last year's security suggestions, because hackers only have to be right once.
Yep.
You have to be right every time. And I guarantee you that hackers, I'll just say it, we have way more patience than you do. And I'll push every button and mash everything and hit every door. One of them damn things is going to open. So, and if you don't have that one door locked, then I'm getting in. And it's regardless if you're using WordPress or you're using HTML, there's a door in your server. I'll find it. I mean, so there's at scale, if you're, even me, I'm not gonna go at scale. If I have a million view website doing e-commerce, taking credit cards, I'm not doing my security. At that point, I'm looking at someone else. I'm getting a cybersecurity guy. I'm getting a really stupid high quality dev, and they're going to work together and just work on closing doors that are going to be open and closed. And I would agree, HTML sites would be best for that. But then still, you're also using JavaScript, and there's
Yeah.
other things that can grab you and get you to using that. So,
But But there is a reason why Google's using it, because they're a big target.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Um, let's see. I have a 700-page website. Is it beneficial to build one press release to each page? Cost is not an issue. I'd say there's diminishing returns, because you have to remember a press release is like, a sawed-off shotgun. It's going to spray everywhere. And so when you get a press release to a URL, some of that authority is going to transfer to all the other pages that that URL links to. So at least one level of partial transfer. And so by the time you get 2 or 3 press releases to important pages of your website, you are covering a lot of ground in a way that most keyword competitors aren't doing. So you very quickly outclass a lot of the smaller competition keywords. And so I'm talking about like the broad 80% here, not the top 20% of keywords, but keywords like, best SEO software and Dentist Toledo. And you get into these keywords and you often find that the competition has neglected off-page SEO, and you just don't need a press release for every page to beat them most of the time. Sometimes, if you're in Clint's town, you're gonna need to go nuts. But barring competing toe to toe with Clint or someone like Clint, odds are you're not gonna need as much off page as you think you might. What do you think, Clint?
I mean, just a scenario. Can you imagine how expensive that would be?
Yeah, it would be really expensive.
Yeah. And then time, oh Jesus. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I do PRs to your main money pages. You're probably gonna have what, 5, 10 of those. And then have your interlinking done right, and the interlinking will take care of the juice. I hate using it, but that's how you articulate it. The power that from their linking will cascade into the rest of your website. But yeah, even considering sending a PR to all 700 pages, geez, holy, that just makes my wallet hurt. I'm too cheap for that.
There's another thing. If you listen, like I've heard Madge from Magic PR and Jeremy from Press Advantage and others, and there seems to be a consensus. Now, I haven't tested it, but there seems to be a consensus that somewhere between 2 and 4 press releases a month, then it just drops off a cliff in terms of effectiveness. So if you sit there and say, all right, well, I can do 3 press releases a month effectively and get gain from it, that's 20 years worth of press releases for this site. So
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't do that.
I mean, the only one that I've heard that says, "Okay, keep doing it over and over," is Bradley over at Semantic Mastery, and they've had success in the tree services industry, and they do. I think he said like one a month. I think that's reasonable. If you have something to talk about, sure, one a month is fine.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but 700 to all 700 pages? No, I wouldn't do that.
Let's see. When changing Favicon, why can it take 3 to 6 months before the new one appears? You'll probably want to test that. Like oftentimes, if you're just using favicon.ico, it's a case of Google cached it and they don't know that you've uploaded an image of the exact same name with different content, and they're waiting for their cache to change. But if you rename it to favicon2.ico, then they get there and go, "Oh, it's a new file. Let's get it." And it might be faster. I think that part of that you might be able to fix yourself, and part of it is, that's the Favicon is a separate Google system. It runs on its own timeline. It might not be as fast as page updates. But the best thing you can do is rename that file and make sure it's clear when Google comes back that this is a new file.
Yeah, I think
What do
that
you
that's
think, Lee?
that's one of the things that we've seen with our discussions over the years about Google struggling with scale, and we see more and more of these instances. I mean, there were things that Google used to process monthly 5 years ago, and then they went to quarterly, and then it's like maybe a couple times a year. And if you think about it from feeding their systems, the favicon, or a changed favicon is not really a ranking factor. At least it's not, one that would be driving their need. Oh, we got to grab the freshest version of that for something. So I can totally see, just for processing, that they might not come around and do it, except for 3 or 4 times a year, because there's no need for it. Most of the time, most people don't change their favicon. So you can try the stuff that Ted, you suggested, maybe name it favicon 2 and put it out there and see if that pushes it faster. But I can totally see them just ignoring that shit because it's not a primary driver of their ranking systems.
And the browser will always display your current favicon. So the little icon in the browser tab will always reflect what's out there, whether you rename it or not. And that's something. It might be the old one in search for a while, and yeah, not much you can do other than that. How will AI agents affect SEO?
SEO's dead because of them. Go
Yeah,
make AI agents and quit doing SEO, please.
Get out of
so
SEO. It's over.
Yep.
so agents is speak for task automation. So AI utilities that can do things for you and take action for you. It's gonna be most beneficial to the SEOs who have their processes well documented. Because those people are going to be able to look at their process documentation that they hire human beings for, and they're going to be able to say, oh, this one can be an agent now, and that one can be an agent now, and they can better automate their documented processes. So I think that's how it's probably going to change SEO to start, is you'll see more agencies automating instead of going offshore VA for parts of their process book. What do you think?
I'll give you an example of that. So I have again, it's one of the e-commerce clients. They did have alt text for any of their images. There is something that's in search, not search, Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog, you can have it crawl all your images, and you could, using AI, plugging into either Gemini or ChatGPT, it'll create alt text for you. Now, it doesn't do a very nice job of optimizing it, but you can adjust the prompt and say, hey, optimize it around this, optimize it that. It comes out with a very good alt text. Now, I had, I don't know, 1,300 alt text to do. I would have had to pay someone to do that. In less than 15 minutes, I perfected a prompt. Screaming Frog ran it for me, and now I have alt text. Put them up. There's a guy I know, good guy. He's starting his class tomorrow, and one of the best things I learned from his class was some SEO is always better than no SEO. And it's like, yeah, just get it up there, and if your page isn't performing as well as you'd like, now you can go back and look at your H1s and title tags and meta descriptions and alt text. Like, is there something I can tweak? Can I make it a little bit better? But you could get your 80% done with AI and Screaming Frog now. And you don't. I mean, it's super cheap and easy. It's just takes a little time, and that's it.
Yeah, so 15 minutes and 32 cents in credits, and you're done.
And that was only 15 minutes because I had to figure out a whole bunch of stuff. But now that I know, I could do it in about 5 to 10 minutes probably. It still just takes a while to crawl, but I could run it and then walk away and do something else for a little while.
Yeah, I've had projects in the past that required hiring temp workers for 6 weeks to do data entry and to rename things and stuff like that. And all of that now can be AI and a script. And be done in an hour instead of done in 6 weeks, and probably at a higher standard. And yeah. So, it's coming if it's not already here. How much of the traffic to a website is bots? I'm going to say that for most websites out there, it is somewhere between 60 to 100%. So you're doing well if you have better ratios than that. And the bot traffic, I've noticed, it starts as soon as you buy and configure the domain name. I start seeing the hacking attempts coming up against the server, usually within the hour of setting up a new website, new hosting, new domain.
Hey, Ted, I do a lot of white label YouTube optimization for folks. And the first thing I warn everybody is you're going to get bombarded with bot comments after about a month or two once you start getting some visibility. And it's just gonna happen. And the bots, that's the downside of becoming visible. Once you become visible, the bots start showing up. And there's not much you can do to stop it, unfortunately.
Yep. And one of the ways that people often self-inflict bot traffic damage is redirecting domains. So you buy an expired domain, you point it at your website, you're really doubling up on all the bots that went to that old domain. So every time you point a new domain at your existing website, just know you're adding on another website's bot traffic on top of what you already had. So maybe think about that before you do it. And if you're doing it in bulk, think about it a lot. Let's see. Does having a dash and a homepage URL have a negative effect? I'd say anecdotally, it hasn't been appreciated by SEOs in general. So I'd say that the opinion of it is rather low. In my own experience, I haven't had big problems with it. So personally, I think if it's working against you, it's kind of a smaller handicap. Like you could overcome it with other SEO efforts. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of inclined to say it's a smallish handicap, if a handicap at all. What do you think, Clint?
Yeah, I mean that's like an old
Mhm.
those look ugly, so let's demonize them kind of thing. I personally wouldn't do it for these days because you're doing brands, so I have them in there. It just kind of looks horrible in the rest of your marketing, but at the end of the day, SEO wise, I don't think it makes all that much of a difference. From testing, we did that. We did testing on that a long time ago and never made any difference. I can't imagine why it would now.
Well, I think that a lot of the theory around that is white hats say that, if you have dashes in there, that's clearly a spam indicator. And when Google sees it, they're not going to rank the site. That's kind of the argument.
It's well reasoned, but where's their proof? Um, all right. So let's see. What is the best SEO strategy to use for an e-commerce website? Oops. Is it different if it's a new website versus old? Well, yeah, and what I've found doing SEO audits largely for ecom, like my audits are super expensive. I only do 2 or 3 a year. Because of that, they tend to usually be larger e-commerce sites. Um, what I've found is I've never had two audits be the same, even remotely close. And what you'll find is that every business like that has different strengths and weaknesses. They have different opportunities they haven't capitalized on yet. They've had different deficiencies in their web development and their past SEO and in their marketing initiatives. And they've had different experiences in how they run promotions and shipping cutoff dates and data entry. So I've never found that the same audit could be used twice. It just hasn't worked out under scrutiny. And because of that, I don't think there is a one best strategy. I think because of that, you have to look at every situation uniquely and develop a custom strategy for that unique situation. And I guess that's the best strategy. What do you think, Lee?
I'll just, the analogy that I would use is, we all have things that we like to do, but, if you're a mechanic and a customer comes and drives their car, into your shop and it's backfiring and smoke is billowing out, the tailpipe, you don't go, oh, I better check the tire pressure. It's just, it doesn't matter. So, when you start looking at what's the problem with a website, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things to look at, and you never know which ones are going to be off, which is why you can't have an audit that's going to be the same. Right? The process, I'm going to go look here and see what I find and chase the signals where they lead me. That can be the same, but which rabbit holes you get dragged down, is site dependent. So, yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, and when I sell those audits, I can't even tell people what's going to be in them. I can tell them I will find things like this, this, and this, but I can't guarantee what I will or won't find in an audit. We have to do the audit to see what's there. And there is a very remote chance that your website has no issues at all, but I can tell you from my experience that has never happened.
Mhm.
So, yeah, the best strategy is to look at their strengths and weaknesses uniquely and make your plan around that.
I can actually use that as an example. It was I don't know, about 4 years ago. I threw together a website, and I was very, very happy with it. It's just a brand new little website that I threw up on WordPress, and had good content and a whole bunch of other things with it. And I said, "Hey Ted, you want to see this little cool website?" And the first thing Ted does is he opens up, his inspect, because he always does that, and he starts cataloging things that he would fix, inside of the code and things like that. And it was brand new. It wasn't that large. It wasn't that complicated, and yet there were issues with it. So, on a larger site, there's no way that you're going to have something, that isn't, large in its scale that affects a large percentage of the site.
And ecom is a death by a thousand cuts, so you really need a good work ethic and this system of if you see a problem, you fix a problem. And
Mhm.
so in my audits on ecom websites, if I see typos, if I see JavaScript errors, if I see weird behaviors and glitches, I'm documenting it as I go because I guarantee in aggregate, all of those little unrelated things equal SEO problems. So if you see a problem, you fix a problem, knowing it's a death by a thousand cuts.
That's a good one, Ted. So maybe a year ago, I was described in my organization as a dog with a bone. I think that was meant as an insult. I took it as a compliment, said, yes, if I find a problem, I'm not going to let go of it. I'm going to hunt it down and say, how do we fix this problem? What is exactly the problem? What's causing the problem? And then what are the ways we can fix this problem? Because sometimes how you fix the problem, there can be multiple ways to fix a problem. It doesn't have to always be you have to do it this way. And that's really what you need, especially when you get into have technical problems. You need someone that can dig in and tell you, look, I found a problem here, I found a problem here, and they're not beholden to, oh, I didn't find any bad links, your site's fine, or your site has, your site has canonical tags for all your pages, everything's fine. Like that's not a technical audit. A technical audit, like you say, Ted, is let's see, let's go into the doctor, and they say, all right, let's check everything. Let's do the blood work, let's do the eye test, let's do the vision, let's do your hearing, we got to do it all to see how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would also tell you, Ted, because you've got that, death by 1,000 cuts, I would go grab, 1,000 bandaid.seo.com after the show. Just saying.
And who do you want on your team? The person that says, if I see a problem, I'm going to fix it? Or the person who says, I'll fix some of the problems? What's ultimately better for your business and your sanity?
Well, when you're dealing with enterprise, sometimes you have to let some things go, and I'm willing to accept that. But my answer is I don't let anything go. I just put it aside for now. Like I never say, yep, we'll never worry about that. I just put it aside for a little bit, and then eventually in the next 6 to 8 months, something's going to pop up. I'm like, hey, remember that thing I talked about a while ago? Maybe we should fix that now. And then people's like, oh, great, now's a great time to fix it.
Yeah, I'm not going to fault a business for only having so many hours in a day, but I'm going to keep that list.
Exactly. Never forget.
There's no reason to not make the bug list.
Yep. Or opportunities list. I've had companies tell me we're not going in that. I've had a company tell me we're not going in that direction. We have no interest in having those kinds of pages on our site. Even though Charles, you show us there's millions and millions of searches a month in opportunity there. We're not interested in that. Okay, no problem. A year later, someone came to me and said, hey, Charles, you told us about something a while ago. Do you still have any of that information? I'm like, I got it right here. Let me just dust it off a little bit and let's implement that. And it was ultimately a good move for everybody. But you can't let go of things. When you find it, you just set it aside, and if they can't do it, they can't do it for whatever reason.
And sometimes advantage isn't for everyone. And you just got to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Let's see. This looks like a question for Charles. Is there any way to decide if the decision maker will sit through the meeting? If not, how would you structure the elevator pitch? I have an answer, but I'll let you go first.
So your elevator pitch, and I've learned this relatively recently. So I'm going to do a shout out to Lee. One of the best things with Lee's course I took is he has this mastermind. And a couple weeks ago, I learned this concept called the story brand. Is that the right word, Lee?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it talks, and this changed how I'm going to do all my pages. This would change how I would do an elevator pitch. No longer am I going to say it's not about me, it's about them and their problem. So my elevator pitch would be, you explain their problem to them. And if they hear you verbalizing the problem they're currently having, they'll stop and listen. And now you've got the extra 2 minutes to say, here's a solution that I can do for you, or I'm the guy who can fix this for you, or we're the company that can fix this for you. So, is your search console, is 90% of your URLs, is Google spending 90% of its time crawling URLs you don't want it to search? If so, give me a shout and I can help you out. Like, you start with their problem, not with yourself. And I've had to switch up a lot of ways I communicate, because that's a better way of doing it too. People don't care about you. They care about themselves and their problems.
Yeah. And the way I do it is the day before the meeting, I would send out a reminder email and say, in the interest of respecting everyone's time, I've attached a 5-minute video where I explain everything. That way you can bring your questions to the meeting and we can get to things directly. And the great thing about that is, A, it makes the meeting shorter. B, they have to watch the video all the way through. They can't interrupt. They can't inject counter opinions to sabotage you halfway through. It's got to be soup to nuts in that 5 minutes. You make your pitch, they hear it all the way through, and then there's debate in the meeting. The problem I always have is there's somebody in the organization who wants to kill the project, and they're coming in to run interference on it. And so if you want it heard uninterrupted without the counter arguments taking over the meeting before you've even had your idea heard, video. Boom.
And I've learned that there are people who don't want to kill the project. They just want to kill you. They want to get you out of the way.
Yeah, that's true too. Let's see. JP says you'll be surprised how many little guys get hacked too. And yeah, but those are usually automated systems that catch common mistakes. Let's see. We have tested if adding the parameter to the URL parameter tool will make. Oh, have we tested if adding the parameter to the URL parameter tool will make the bots crawling the URLs? There's a bit of a typo in there, but I get the idea. It used to work. So yeah, I'd say it was fairly well tested as a viable solution. You did have to maintain it through all of those website redesigns. So if you didn't update it for the new URLs, you'd have the problems coming back. But Google killed the tool, so you can't use it anyway now. So the option's totally gone. So the only thing you can do now is actually fix the problem. Let's see. I figured out that all the websites have backlink provider have the same IP address. I know it's a problem, but just wanted to learn from an expert point of view. I don't know. You're right. Technically, Google could look at that, but if every website on Wix had a footer link to my website, I think that's going to be really powerful, even though all those websites appear to be coming from the same IP address. Similarly, you can have gateways at like corporations like Microsoft that are as big as a university. And so you could have a lot of different websites at Microsoft that all appear to be the same, small number of IP addresses, but are actually thousands of servers. Same thing with universities. Same thing could be true with, smaller municipalities and the way that their telcos set up. So I think if Google were to punish your backlinks being on a smaller number of IP addresses, there would be a lot of collateral damage that would largely hurt big companies, governments, universities, hosting providers. And I don't think Google would necessarily do that. So I'm skeptical that it's a thing most people would ever need to worry about. So if you're doing something really black hat, then yeah, you're probably onto something. But I think if you're largely just getting average internet backlinks, I don't think it's a big deal. What do you think, Clint?
I think if it's his only source of backlinks, then yeah, that's going to be a problem. But if you've got other sources and you're smart and you're varying where your backlinks are coming from, that'll get lost in the wash and you're going to be okay. The other thing that could, typically the only person or system that's going to find that kind of thing is going to be a manual review. And then, from that provider's standpoint, do all those sites look the same? If they all look the same, the IP really doesn't matter. They're going to get found out anyway, and then you're going to get penalized for them. So um, it's, but again, that's only if that's your only source of backlinks. And then are you pissing other people off and then in turn getting reported to Google? And then that's how they're going to find you. Google does not care that much about you that they're going to go find your backlinks and penalize you unless someone bitches and cries. That's generally how you get a manual review.
The dear John Mueller, hey, is this normal? Is this okay?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
snark SEO, yeah.
Let's see. Mike says that any PHP framework is prone to being hacked and they need to be maintained. So yeah, that's true. And just because Windows has more malware and viruses doesn't mean that Windows is inherently bad. And that's true too. It just means you have an extra maintenance component of keeping your system secure and patched and updated and scanned and backed up. So those are costs of making that choice. And if you're okay with that cost, then the choice is just fine. So that's all that means is everything has pros and cons. Let's see. Storelift Labs once did 76,000 product descriptions and alt tags in one day, made a huge difference. So I guess that's the AI updating data entry. And Jose in the comments said, good job explaining story brand. If you need help with implementing story brand for your business, which can really make your business compelling to shoppers and investors and just really look professional and communicate clearly to why you exist and how you can help, talk to Jose. Jose has this down. He's a really good expert on that topic. He's in most of the big SEO communities out there. Jose Ponce Jr. He can help you with
Yeah.
story brand.
Yeah, Jose's
He's the one who
dude,
taught
man.
it to me, and he rocked my world when I learned it.
Yeah.
So yeah, big endorsement of Jose. All right. If you need more content to consume or if you have more questions, feel free to go to SEOfightclub.org where we have our forum community. So if you have questions after hours, head over there, help us build up the forum. It's free. It's another free thing you can do in SEO. Also, check out SEO This Week. That's Clint's YouTube channel. He goes over information that nobody else is going over. And, well, Advantage isn't for everyone. So if you're not going there, I guess Advantage isn't for you. And Lee, you have anything to announce?
Nothing right now. We're getting ready to start. I think we're starting tomorrow is our first day of this current training. So I'm excited. We've got a lot of good interaction in the group, people doing a lot of the pre-training stuff. So we're excited and ready to go.
Oh, and Jordan Pierce would like to remind you about Google Business Profile Roast. That is GBP Roast. That is his channel. And they look at business profiles and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in the profile so that you can learn from it and do better with your local SEO. So check that out. It's a new show as well. Be sure to subscribe because it's free and it helps out the content creators because honestly, a channel like ours will buy us a cup of coffee. So it's really a labor of love, and your subscriptions to these channels they enable features that allow us to do a better job for you. So always subscribe to content you like, especially if you want it to continue. Thanks a lot, everyone. We'll see you next time.